Okay, wait, that was it? I schedule, I use their scheduling thing for it, and usually before I can start my lives, it kind of gives me like a little waiting room thing that I can check my lighting before I go fully live. But if I tap on the, okay, good to know. That way anyway, still trying to learn this whole live feature thing because it is different on my phone than it is on my computer, which drives me a little bit insane. Anyways, hi, I'm Elena and I'm enchanted for you to be here on my channel. Hello and welcome. I'm glad you're able to stop by. This is for our weekly book Coven meeting. We talk about a whole bunch of lovely witchy things, and for now we're going over this book. It's called Elemental Witchcraft by Heron Michelle, and we are making our way through it slowly and steadily, and we have had a couple of meetings already of this book club, and I'm just loving the information we go through. I don't agree with everything she says in here. I talk about that extensively, and this book is very ceremonial magic based, that kind of thing, but it is still very interesting, and I love going through it, and I love learning things with you, and I just love hearing feedback from you. So hello, hope you're doing great, hope things are going well, and I guess we can just, plow right in and see what we got. So for this meeting, we are going over page 163. Hi! We're going from page 163 through page 176. That is, if you don't have a book with page numbers or anything like that, that's starting from the Tools of Elemental Fire all the way through, and we're stopping right before the ritual, like body postures and that kind of thing. So, yeah, every week we go through about 15 pages of these books, of this book, and we talk about all the things. I also do have a follow-up post on my website, blog post, kind of going into things a little bit deeper, organizing stuff a little bit, and just talking about it more. So if you want to check it out, my website is elenaanchanted.com. Should be linked down in the description below. I could probably also have it be popped up somewhere out there because I did figure out how to make little pop-up things happen here during a live. So hello! And I'm happy you're able to join too. It's good seeing you on my live. I like to start these off with a quote that I like, or a saying that I liked, or something interesting about it. And I didn't really have like a favorite quote last meeting, but this meeting I do. For this meeting I do. Okay, so my favorite quote is, it's part of like a full statement, but I'm only really taking out this section of the quote because it really resonates with me. Well, how do I put it? Maybe it's not a full sentence quote. Maybe it's like half a sentence and then followed up with another sentence that I really, really enjoy. And it's on page 170, or again, if you don't have page numbers, it's the first paragraph of The Witch's Altar. My best part is, what we make space for in our homes sets it as a priority. And then it talks about, and that priority will mirror up through our other 4 aspects of ourselves, etc., etc., etc. But I really like that first part because it can be applied to everything, not just spirituality based. So whatever we make room for in our homes, be it for animals, people, family, friends, loved one, clutter, trash, mess, things we dislike, those are the kind of energies we set for our home. And I believe that your home is a representation of you, of yourself. Okay, not 100%, because if you do not live alone, then it's not really like fully yourself thing, but it's a reflection of the people that live within the home. How's that? So if you are living by yourself, if it is your own space, that kind of thing, then it is a reflection definitely of you. If you live with the people in there, it's a reflection of the people that live in there. And what you set your space aside for is and what you set space for in your homes is what you make a priority. I love that. I really do. So Nurse said she's behind the book. That's okay. You don't need to be like fully on time with the book, with the pages and stuff that we're reading. I'm just going along through things just like time-wise, but you could pop in whenever it works for you, however it is. We've had conversations with people that haven't even heard about the book or anything like that. So yes, I am already married. I appreciate your feelings for me. Please be respectful during this chat. So without further ado, we will continue from the start of this. Now, our last meeting, we talked about witches' tools and the other elements that it came alongside with. We talked about air, earth, and air. And this time we're talking about fire and water. So for the fire, she brings up the athame. She comes up with a couple ways of like describing it and things like that. It can be described either as athame or athame. And like even a couple other descriptions, which I don't really think it's just it pronunciation is important, but I don't think it's like the most important thing. In any case, an athame is a ritual knife used in spirituality and different spiritual religious practices, mostly for ceremonial type of magic. So an athame is a knife, or not exactly like a kitchen knife, more like a dagger, and it's usually decorated and that kind of thing. So yes, and she talks about when she thinks about a tool that represents fire, she thinks about the blacksmith's forge, and it's a blade that is made in the hottest fires until it is so hot it glows red, then pounded through sheer strength, muscle, and iron until it surrenders into an exalted form, which is great. I love that visualization for it. I don't think that all tools representing the element fire is something that needs to be, forged in the blacksmith's forge. But being next to a blacksmith's forge, it's really interesting because that's the first thing is fire. It's hot, it's warm. I do a like medieval reenactment stuff or Viking-ish reenactment stuff, and I share some of that things on my Instagram. I do have a vlog about it coming up some point eventually. And we do camping, and we try to live within that kind of time frame. I have my own like Viking group, clan, that type of thing, and it's so much fun. And we do have our own blacksmith, and very medieval style with like the little poofy thingy or whatever and that kind of stuff. And we do it at a castle, and it's part of like the castle's blacksmith's forge, and that is so much fun to just kind of like, I don't know, try. I've not I've tried like pounding the metal and stuff and the different things that he makes, and just kind of like being part of that. It's a whole lot of fun. It is a whole lot of work, and it takes so much, like you can see all of the blacksmith being all like muscly and just how much effort it takes and whatever to kind of like pound the hammer over the metal and picking it up and moving it over, and it's all hot and whatever, and etc, etc, etc. It already visually looks like a lot of work. Now imagine having to actually physically do the work. So not only is it visually already exhausting and labor intensive, but multiply that by at least 10, and that's the actual physical aspect of it. So her representation of how it's like built, pounded through sheer strength and muscle is definitely the accurate visualization for how a knife would be hand forged and would be handmade, that sort of thing. I like that. So she also talks about how the knife is born of fire for the purpose of establishing our boundaries and defending our sovereignty with the fires of our will. Yes and no. But yes and no. I don't think that tools of fire are established solely for that purpose. Um, and they are great as a tool to set for setting boundaries, but I don't think that's like the main purpose of the tool of fire. A big thing in regards to the tool of a fire is the element fire and what that element embodies and what it has and that kind of thing. It is not for setting our boundaries, it is for making sure that our spirit within is brightened, is light, is able to shine through. So she also calls that the occult parlance, the altar tools were called weapons, and she thinks that the tool of fire, but for fire, that's exactly what it's called for. Again, I don't really think so because the tool of fire and how it's just used. Yes, she brings an athame into the she brings an athame as an example for a tool of fire. If there's going to be continued disrespect with that, I will take you off of my live chat. So please, this is a book club, book coven gathering. And knives or daggers or swords, as she later mentions, have been used as weapons, but they've also been used for other things way more often than a weapon. For example, a knife in the kitchen, you use it to cook, you use it to cut vegetables, you use it to make food, to bring nourishment to you, your family, that kind of thing. A knife is also being used in various forms out in the fields for harvesting, for gathering herbs, for gathering, vegetables, that kind of things. Knives, even though that they are born of fire, they are not called to be a weapon. Like, you can imbue that energy into a, ritualistic tool to be a weapon of protection, a weapon of fighting, or however. But I don't like how she just puts so much, like, almost anger towards it in regards to that tool. And I'm I'm not loving it. Okay, you, how do I put this? Time out. Next we're continuing on talking about still with the athame, and infuse the athame's power with power of the will, and you can charge to empower your magic, banishing fear within humanity. She talks about it very, very I don't know what that means. She talks about infusing the athame with the power of the will, and I do like that because it is a very directing tool. An athame, because of the point, it is similar to the one that we've talked about previously, but it is more direct with its edges. Hi, thank you for stopping in. And she also talks about how it's a purpose for cutting or carving energetically and banishing enchantment. Yes, because it is a knife, it is used for carving and cutting into candles, cutting into herbs, that sort of thing. Again, she kind of pulls back a little bit from the whole it is a weapon type of situation, but it is. She also says that she finds it very important that the tool of fire be constructed of steel or contain iron in some manner. Is it though? I don't think so. That's after she mentions that athames have been designed out of like bone or porcelain or horn or any of the other things. Then I'm not loving her very strong sense of what an athame should be. An athame in itself is a ritualistic knife used for spiritual cutting. That is an athame in ceremonial magic form. It is not used for any physical cutting. It is not used for any different. It is not used for any physical cutting. It is not used for cooking. It is not used for harming anyone. An athame in ceremonial practice is used as a spiritual cutting tool. That sort of thing. The book we are reading is called Elemental Witchcraft by Heron Michelle. And we're almost like halfway through the book. It's really interesting, and I love her perspective, but I also disagree with a lot of it. Next, she brings up the grand tool of fire as the sword. Yes, I don't think it is the grand tool of fire, but it is a tool of fire. I like how she connects it as a symbol about the ethics and alignment with the divine will and the courage that it takes to practice witchcraft without fears as our true selves. And that she also believes the sword holds surrender, remembering knighting ceremonies where the warrior kneels to accept his solemn duty of service. I like her connection with it. I wouldn't exactly full on say that it's the grand tool of fire. I think actual fire is the grand tool of fire and that sort of thing. Another part, was it here that she talks about the fire, or hold on, I do have a note for it. Okay, yeah, previous page. She talks about how fire is the strongest element. I have a couple things underlined, so I don't have it fully like exactly for it. Okay. She says, out of all the elements, fire is the most projective, aggressive, and wild. And how she says that it's one of the most powerful elemental tools, or one of the most powerful elemental elements. I don't think so. I really don't think so. Yes, I agree that fire is the most projective. It is the most viewed. It is the most seen. It is the most, how do I put it? Most known, most possibly most respected because of the visual damage fire can cause, because of the visualization that we have for it. And humans are visual creatures. I do not think that fire is the most powerful element. In fact, I think fire can only be strong and powerful with other elements at play. Because if you take fire and you take away air, there's going to be no fire. Fire cannot exist without air. If you take it down to the human, down physical level, whatever, if you light a candle and then you put that candle in a jar and you close the jar and there's no fire in it, if you take the candle, put it in the jar, close the jar, and there's no more air in it, there's going to be no fire. Fire is only as strong as the other elements that help sustain it. So I think in regards to elemental standing alone type of stuff, fire is one of the weaker ones. Not exactly weaker ones, but one that cannot really sustain itself by itself. And fire also, in order to exist, needs to be fueled by something. So air is one of it, and keeps fire alive, and earth, such as, wood is the common one, paper, something for the fire to burn is what also causes fire to be stronger. So without the earth element and without the air element, the fire element cannot be fire. Visually, and a lot of people have the idea that fire is the most like, yeah, it's out there. I follow the element of fire, you know, and that kind of thing. And I love that for you. Absolutely. Yes, it is very bold. It is very outgoing. It is a very like direct type of energy to work with fire because it's so visual. It is so easy to kind of connect with. But it's just, it can't be on its own. It needs help from the other elements. Love working with fire, water, and sometimes the earth. Yes, all the elements, working with all the elements is a great thing. Fire is the most instantaneous and visual. Yes, that is true. In my perspective, I think air as a standalone has the most kind of like influence amongst all the other elements, because if you take away air, nothing else can really exist. Without air, there's no fire. Without air, there's no plants growing, no earth happening, nothing like that. Even water is made of air. It's H2O. That kind of thing. So elements are fascinating to look at, but they are just, they cannot be on their own. They need each other, and one is not really more powerful than the other. They all work together. That's why every time you talk about elemental witchcraft, there's the 4 elements. Hi, glad you're able to stop by. And yes, a lot of people have different connections to different elements, that sort of thing. And is this a cult thing? Depends on what you think it's a cult thing. This is not a cult. But we are talking about a spiritual-based book on witchcraft. So it is not a cult. I do call it my book Coven because it is a group type of thing. So technically this is a book club with witchy energy. We create a synthetic human, combining all the elements together, which are in a human. Like creating a synthetic human? I think science has been trying to work on that for a very, very long time, and that has not exactly, you know, came about that great, because making a human, you need way more than things that come from water, fire, earth, and air. If you are an anime person and you've seen The Full Metal Alchemist, you will know. Okay, moving on to the next one. We were talking about the... Oh, I also put a note in talking about other things in regards to the element of fire. She only mentions the athame or the sword. There's other things that could be used in regards to like imbuing the element of fire. She talks about why it's important to bring about the tools into your ritual practice. Other tools I think that could also work with the element of fire, and that I feel also work with the element of fire, are candles, because fire. That should be like the number one ritual tool to imbue fire, because fire. The second one, I think obsidian mirrors. Not exactly like the regular standard mirrors that we know, but an obsidian mirror made out of actual glass obsidian, because obsidian is a glass forged by fire, volcano, water, fire, volcano, cooled down usually in water, but the glass of it already has the imbued properties of fire. So I also think that is a tool with fire. I do have videos planned and coming up. Hopefully this month, the plan is for this month, talking about different witchcraft tools and different things of which element that they kind of fall through and that sort of thing. I'm getting a lot of compliments on how I look today. I really appreciate that. That's first for my live. Now, then she starts talking about the element of water. So she talks about the altar tool being a chalice, and a chalice is a drinking vessel, so it's pretty much anything that you can drink out of. She talks about it usually being made out of silver because it's in connection with the moon, and yes, she has a very Wiccan ritualistic magic approach to her book and the tools that she studies and the things that are going on, but she is also kind of like very, how do I put it, rigorous about it. um I do really enjoy how she mentions the food safety for it. She says that, beware drinking alcohol from any pewter vessels unless you know it's lead free, avoiding aluminum or other types of chalices to drink from, making sure that they are food safe. Because, if, for example, if you do wine, ritualistic wine, doesn't have to be ritualist. If you're using wine in a ritual or in spellcraft, okay, wine is very acidic and it interacts with whatever it's in. And she mentions it, not the material from the chalice not being porous, and it's being made out of something that is food safe, which is, yes, absolutely 110% true. Then she talks about the grand tool of water being the cauldron, like the witch's cauldron. Yes and no. For me, anytime I would use a cauldron, like a little one or anything like that, I would mostly kind of associate it with fire. For me, that's in my practice. That's how I'm feeling towards it. I believe that the witch's cauldron mostly has a stronger fire element to it than water. Yes, it holds water, but overall, I think the cauldron represents all of the elements in order for it to be used as the cauldron, because it's made out of metal, forged by fire. You are using it to either cook ingredients or other things in it. And overall, it's all kind of like mixed in with the elements. She calls it the grand tool of water. I guess depends on which practice, which path you're taking. I don't see it as the grand tool of water. Um, I would think the grand tool of water is water itself. So her talking about like the grand main tool of this and this, yeah, yes and no. In regards to moderators, I do not have any moderators because I'm not very like, I try to do things on time and constantly and consistently, but it's not really available, and I don't really have that many people that come and watch at the same time. I really appreciate that. Maybe we could talk about that later. Combo of water and fire as it's cooking. Yes. Yeah, it's usually a combination of things. So I like her explanation of stuff. I like that her bringing in different tools and introducing which elements that they are mostly connected with for like beginner readers. I think it's great. I also don't really think it's fully exactly what it is. And she also talks about cleansing and preparing tools of water. She has specific like cleansing techniques for all of the elemental tools. For example, she suggests different cleansing techniques for air elements, water, fire. I think those types of cleansing things can be used for any and all items, depending if it's safe for using it. For example, she talks about sunlight, how to. Hi, Issy. No, you're gonna need to go, please. That is my dog, and she wants attention. So for the cleansing techniques of fire elements, she suggests lodestone, flame, or sunlight. Again, I think that could be used for any of the ritual tools as long as they're able to handle it. So sunlight is a cleansing tool also, but I also think it's a very energetic, imbuing kind of cleansing thing. So sunlight is not a neutral, like, cleansing technique. Is that how you put it? To use for things. Water is more neutral for cleansing, but not everything can be cleansed with water. Example, some certain crystals need to be cleansed, energetically cleansed, before you're able to use them for like a new purpose or that kind of thing. But some crystals should not be in contact with water because it can damage them, or in contact with sunlight because it could damage them, and so on and so forth. I think any sort of cleansing technique can be used for any tool. It doesn't really matter if it's a fire tool, it needs to be cleansed, with a fire specific thing. I don't like that. That's not how it is. So you're reading a book called Law of Attraction. I read that book. If it's the same book that I think you might be talking about, I read that book. I like that book. This is Elemental Witchcraft, and I have a couple blog posts and like little snippets of it and things like that, so you can look through the past stuff here. But hi, Kevin. Thank you for stopping by. We are a, book club, Coven type of thing. All right. Afterwards, she talks about preparation of elemental tools. And she did go over the purpose of dedication of these tools and how kind of like to work with. And there's a part in it that I simultaneously really like and really dislike at the same time. So with the paragraph preparation of elemental tools, she talks about the purpose of dedication is to have the two of you coordinating your energies and focusing them on a single purpose. So that is in regards to taking a specific tool and giving it a specific purpose. For example, I have this pencil. This is a plain pencil. It could be used as a pencil to, write and do whatever. But if I want to consecrate it and make it specifically dedicated to something, then it becomes more a holistic tool. And this, she kind of talks about things further. So she says that you need make sure you have consent from this object to take the job. So asking consent from the item to take on its ritualistic purpose. Yes and no. So tools initially created to become tools are not full on like sentient beings, even though it's a gray area. But for example, a pencil is designed, created, and made and used for writing things. Some have an eraser to erase your mistake and to continue writing. It is what it is used for. You don't need to ask permission for a pencil to become a pencil because it is a pencil. But if you are going to use, for example, said pencil in a specific ritualistic setting and only for that specific ritualistic setting, you need to have more of a connection with said tool than just, picking something off of whatever. Again, that's not like 100% necessity. This is just going in a bit deeper if you want to really make a, for example, ceremonial type of spell, ritual practice where you are like full on in the zone, dedicated, that type of thing. I have pencils, pens, it's usually a purple pen that I use specifically in like a journal or that kind of thing, but it is not, and I don't have a problem with using a different pencil or a pen if I can't find mine, but I did have one kind of like, not exactly made, but like set aside for that specific thing. So an novitiate mentions that sunlight and moonlight more about recharging, and water and air incense feels more like cleansing. I like that thought. Yeah, it's a good sense to put it. February is a month cleansing and clearing of self and clearing of your space, which is what I'm doing now, preparing for the spring season. Nice, that is a good way of putting it. So when she talks about preparating elemental tools, she talks about consecrating them for something specific and using it for that purpose only. And okay, taking for my own example, yes, I agree. I have specific tools used for specific magics, and I prefer to use those tools. But if I'm in a situation where I did not, for example, bring my chalice that I use in a ritualistic sense, I have this onyx crystal chalice that I just love. I came across it randomly when I was doing, I think it was a crystal cave exploration. We were traveling around with my husband, and I love it. But the thing is extremely heavy. It's giant, and it's pretty much only great to kind of keep at home, or if I'm preparing and doing like a spiritual ritual outside, if it's like an easy way for me to put something and carry it, and hopefully not by myself, because the thing is, it's made out of rock, okay? It is a full-on chalice that is made out of onyx. I love it, and that is my like consecrated tool. But if I am doing a ritual or a spell, for example, and I have the calling of like, oh, I want to make, you know, an offering, share a drink of either water, wine, juice that I have on hand or whatever, because sometimes you get the sense of something else that needs to be added, and I don't have anything near me. I think I was at I don't remember, I think it was doing either a meditation. It was a meditation. It was not like a full-on ritual. I think it was more of like a meditation grounding type of thing. And I was in a hotel, and I was called towards like sharing a drink with whichever energy was with me at that time. I was at a hotel. I didn't have any of my tools or any of my chalices or anything like that used specifically. You know what I had? Those plastic cups that are usually in like a little plastic bag that they put for by the sink for like for when you brush your teeth, that kind of stuff. So I had 2 of those cups still, you know, in the plastic wrapping thing, whatever, plastic cups, and I'm just like, well, this is what I got. I'm sharing a drink with my guides in a plastic cup, because in the end, it really doesn't matter how fancy you are with your tools and your stuff, as long as the connection is there, as long as the energy is there. So, you know, I was full on, it wasn't like a red solo cup, although that would have been absolutely hilarious, but I was sharing a drink with my guides in a plastic cup at a hotel room. Because nobody really cares. It doesn't need to be fancy. If it works, then it works. That's all that matters, okay? Forget even the cups. If you have a beer bottle and you're doing anything spiritual and you feel the need to share it or whatever, because sometimes they want to drink too. I would be during my Viking camps and whatever and walking through the woods, and I would just be drinking a bottle of beer. And I'd get that sense, and I'm just like, okay. So then I would pour some beer out and do a little lament next to the forest and that kind of stuff, and then like move on. It doesn't need to be fancy. Ceremonial magic is great, and doing all of this like beautiful altar setup and ritualistic stuff is amazing, and it really puts you in the mood, in the space, if you have everything prepped and if you have everything planned, and making it all Pinterest pretty and perfect is great. It's fantastic. We talked about previously how our little crow brains like shiny things, and it's great, but you don't need it. You can use whatever works for you. It doesn't need to look like anything else anybody else has. You have mugs for coffee and you want to do, you know, a connection with your ancestors, and you know, share a drink with them while you're meditating or talking with them, or just trying to do a connection, and you don't have a fancy chalice to use for this, teacups work fine, plastic cups work fine, whatever works, whatever works. which is why I like her statement here that you need to kind of get consent from that object, because if you are dedicating a specific thing to a specific thing for long-term use, yes, you should have a good connection with it. You can't just take something and be like, oh, because it's pretty, I'm going to use this as my item. And you feel kind of like an ick from it. You still use it because if you take a picture of your ritual, it looks pretty. Then that is the wrong thing. But if it works for you, then it works for you. That's all that matters, is that it works for you specifically. Who cares what anybody else thinks? Red solo cup with your deities. Also, she talks about the different she also mentions in regards to consecrating a specific tool how it's keyed to your energy and how nobody else can really use it around, which I kind of agree with. If you do have a specific tool that you consecrate and make specific for an item, for example, my chalice that I talked about, my onyx chalice, it is now my item, and I'm very certain that any other practitioner or whatever person would never like just randomly pick it up to use it for something else, because even if they don't know that that is what I set it for directly, their subconscious, their energy will know that it is not for them to take. Okay, following the ceremonial rules are often a hindrance. Don't often have the energy to fully set it up. Yes, I agree with you. Because the setup for doing something full-on ceremoniously should honestly be doing a full-on ceremonious ritual. It's not a one-time kind of thing. It's usually stretched out through a couple of days, and some people just either don't have the patience for it, don't have the time for it, or don't even really are aware that a full-on ceremonial thing is brought out across a couple of days, because it does take the energy to full-on plan and design and figure out what you're doing. Okay, that's kind of like step one, day one. Another step is to set everything up, to prepare everything, to put everything into place, that kind of stuff. That is usually, a whole day dedicated just for that. And then the last part is to actually do the ceremonial rite, rituals, spell, spirit, whatever, and that is another part. So it's usually at least a 3-day thing, no matter how, if it's just you or if it's a big project with a lot of people, especially if it's with a lot of people. It is more than just a one-time thing. You can't be like, okay, on this, we just passed a Sabbath in Mulk. On this in Mulk, I will do, a full-on ritual. And you just kind of have a schedule. I'm talking from my own experience. Here's that from before of how I did things. Okay, on my calendar, I have this scheduled. I want to do a big spell ritual thing for this date because this day is special. Okay, yes, I got it. And then I completely forget about it. And then on that day, I'd be like, oh shit, I wanted to do this. There's a reason why I wanted to do it. I'm going to do it. So in that whole entire day, I try to cram in the planning, the prepping, the doing, the everything, and all of that. And by the time I actually get to the point of trying to meditate, calm down, ground myself to actually, do the magic, I am tired. And then it just doesn't feel right. And it feels like I put in all of this effort to get really nothing out of it. So doing a full-on ceremonial rite takes more than one day. So somebody says, what if I do, if I don't have the full energy to do it? Don't do it only if you're up to doing it. Yeah, that's a good one. Yes, that is a good way of going about it. Follow your energy, follow what feels right. So I think in regards to ceremonial magic, how she kind of talks about here, a couple of the books that a lot of the books that I've read don't really mention that it requires multiple days pretty much of preparation. Even if you have, a group that you're working with, it takes a while. We're just people. We have a limited amount of energy. Issy, stop it. We have a limited amount of energy of what we can fit into, a time. Please, puppy. No, I know you want, but no, go. Go. Thank you. So yeah, it takes energy. It takes time. We don't need to be all fancy. It's nice to be fancy, but we need to make sure we pace ourselves for being fancy. Another thing that I keep bringing up about this book is that she provides visuals and charts and that sort of stuff, which makes it feel like a textbook, and I like it. The whole, spirituality 101 class, that sort of thing. And there's like other diagrams previously that she provides that I just really, really enjoy. Here she talks about different hand positions for the elemental tools. Previously, I talked about using your hands as, your biggest tools, and I like how she reiterates this. I've also talked in the previous chat about the wand and how I don't usually use a wand in my practice. I just use my hands. I do the same thing for an athame. If, for example, I want to like sever a tie of energy, I would use like my hands as a severing thing. And she talks about the different ritualistic tools and their different like symbols. For example, this tool being the natural athame wand or projection thing, usually with like the two fingers out, or this being the horned god evocation, and so on and so forth. So I like how she brings that into perspective, and how she shows your palm and like this, how it's the planetary symbols are mapped out on it. I like that because the most important tool for any of your magical workings is you. That kind of thing. So in regards to having health, playing up, or family needs last minute, that's life. And a lot of books talk about how to do rituals right, but it's often not doable because life happens. Yeah, because there really is no right way to do it. It is not exactly a baking formula. It is a cooking formula, not baking. Baking is more of a, science and chemistry and physics, and Issy, stop it. Baking is more, chemical reaction wise. You need to have a certain specific amount of, like, example, yeast to sugar formula to get the right thing to happen. But spirituality and spells is not exactly like a baking recipe. It's more of like a cooking recipe of like, that's enough garlic. Try to think of it that way. Setting boundaries is important, yes, and I agree that is not very that simple. If you move cross country where you have no, actual family attachments, makes it a lot easier. Okay, so moving on, she also talks about hands being a natural tool, as I've just reiterated as well, that we only need our bodies for magical work. And then she talks about mapping out your hand for the seven planets, 7 aspects. So she talks about the base of the thumb being Venus, the index finger being Jupiter, middle finger being Saturn, ring finger being Sun or Apollo, pinky finger being Mercury, and then the palm being Moon, Luna, and Mars. And I like that. A little introduction to palmistry, kind of, sort of. So she also talks about the if you were here in the previous in one of our previous meetings, I don't remember if it was the one before or the one before that. No, the one before this. I talked about your hands being your tools, and how majority of the books talk about the right hand being the hand to receive the energy and the left hand to put out the energy, and vice versa, depending if you are left-handed or right-handed. And I like how she puts yeah, right hand to give, left hand to receive. I like how she also puts that in regards to her talk, because not a lot of the books mention that if you're a left-handed dominant person, then it's going to be swapped. And I really like how she, towards the end, talks about trying what works for you and experimenting, and that is just, you know, the most important part in regards to witchcraft and practicing things. Find out what works for you specifically. So then she talks about the witch's altar, which is also where my favorite quote comes in. Then she talks about that if you carve out a sacred space in your home, you announce to divinity that spirituality is important to you. Yes, absolutely 110%. But not everybody can make a specific setup spot, visual, out and about, to announce their kind of like dedication. So when I think of setting up a sacred spot or a sacred place of devotion for whichever deity, divinity, whoever you're working with, it does not need to be some big, grand, elaborate thing. It could just be a little placemat with a candle on top of it if you need to be, you know, inconspicuous with it. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. It does not to be anything grand. It just needs for the energies, kind of like a home base within your home to set to. Does that make sense? So if you have the ability to full on set up an altar with all of the, you know, shiny witchy things and that kind of stuff in your home out on display, that's amazing. I am happy for you. That is awesome. I have been able to do so. I love that I can fully display it. Before, when I was, you know, a wee little witch still living in the broom closet, I did not have the ability to do so. If I were to put out anything that resembles anything else outside of the religion that I was in, outside of what my parents approved of, would have been a big issue for me. So I used scented candles. My mother loves scented candles. There's like a shop called Yankee Candles and whatever, and she would constantly get them. So I started to love scented candles too. Not really, because too much of a strong scent bothers me, but I would have a little spot where I'd put like a little pretty mat that would match my room, and I would put a candle on top of it. And usually on the bottom of that candle, because they're glass, if I had it flipped over, I had a pen that only showed up if you shone ultraviolet light to it. And on the bottom of that candle, I would usually put down a pentacle and kind of like an intention or whatever. And to an outside person, they would just see a scented candle. To me, that was my little altar. That was my little spot. That was my little form of rebellion. And then later on, I would add, you know, other things to it that were inconspicuous as well. So I have a lot of tips for those broom closet witches, because I had to be sneaky since I was 12 years old. Yeah. My favorite hiding spot was, I had this armchair in my bedroom. It was pretty much about the size of the chair kind of thing that I'm sitting in now, so it wasn't big, but it was kind of fancy, and it was like a fake leather, and like the leather stretched all the way down to the bottom of it, so it was kind of like wrapped into it. And on the bottom of it, it had a little zipper, so you could kind of like unzip the leather bits. And then some chairs like that chair, on the cushion of it, under the cushion of it, had different like ropes going across it, or they were not ropes, they were like bands, cords, whatever. And I would have my diary or witchy books or that kind of thing. Usually it was about a diary, like a witchy book that I was reading from the library at that time, and like my grimoire, my journal, my book of shadows from back then. So I would take those 3 books, which would be kind of like, all 3 combined would be pretty much like that, and I would slip it in between that cord and then zip it off. You would never know. When you that under it, my witchy books are there hiding from my mother. It worked. Okay, she never found that spot. She found other hiding spots. She never found that one. So that is a good hiding spot to do. For those of you broom closet witches. Okay. Yeah. Oh, again, in regards to like the whole broom closet witch thing, find things that you can study that are still considered, you know, witchcraft, spirituality, or whatever, blah, 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 but would still fit into the norms of your home. The first thing that I have studied in spirituality was herbs and tinctures and plant medicine. And my mother has studied that as well. So she actually taught me medicinal things about plants and growing things, and she has a garden and she would do her own, you know, tonics and that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's witchcraft too. But she didn't see it that way. She just saw it as plant and herbal medicine. And that's part of it. So there's always ways around. There's always ways to figure it out. Okay. Then we're talking about setting up your altar, and she talks about the different placements of where you can put it, either like a tabletop or a desk or drawer. And I like how she, you know, provides examples, but she provides examples for very open, practiced people. Sometimes you just need to think out of the box to be able to set your stuff up, which is fine, which is okay. Then she talks about what a typical witch's altar will need to be, and that it needs to be large enough to hold the consecrated tools, and it also holds the symbol, blah, 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 and that those could be in the form of blah, 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 and whatever. I don't full on like her language of like, it should, that's how it is, that's what it needs to be, because it's different for everybody. It doesn't need to be the same exact thing throughout. It needs to just work for you. Yeah. So just reading through the comments here. Making a box that fits just what you need. Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that I did use, even in my out and about practice, even now, I have a little wooden box that has drawers in it that I keep most of my tools that I used for, you know, all my witchy stuff. And then on top of it, I kind of use it as like an altar top. So that is also a great thing to use. Absolutely. Doing a box, stuff that you hold it in, and the top that you can use as an altar piece. Or I have a traveling altar that I made and that I bring with me, and that's kind of what you can just do at home. I'm debating if I should go and grab it because that traveling altar is just right down that way. Or if there's interest to see it, I will go grab it. Otherwise, I'm just going to continue talking about it. Overall, I will show it in a video eventually, and I will link the video of me making it up at the top here, but that has just been one of my favorite things ever. Thank you. Thank you for complimenting my voice. I've heard that a lot. I'm happy it's very peaceful. That's only when I'm not mad. When I'm mad, it's not very peaceful. All right, then she talks about a working altar layout. And yes, and how it needs to be even more specialized type of working altar, and how it needs to be easily accessible, and that it needs to, you know, have extra space, and that it needs to be in a place that you can kind of be left to set it up and leave it there all the time. Yes, in an ideal, absolute, perfect situation, and somebody who is completely out in the open, somebody who has the room, who has the space, absolutely. Yes, if you can do it, great. I used to be able to do it in the home we had in the US. Here, I do not have the space to constantly have a working altar up and out and about. So I have to kind of set things up, put things away, then come back to it, reset it up, and put it away, and that sort of stuff, which is fine. It's okay. It doesn't need to be what you think it needs to be. It just needs to be what works for you. Exactly. And I I'm not a fan of how she sets up and what you need to kind of have like this. I like how she provides an example what she does. And she says, you know, she prefers a chair with arms that release like pressure on her shoulders, or seated on the floor using a cushion or whatever. I like her examples. I don't like how she says you need to do XYZ, or this is an ideal representation of what it needs to be, blah, blah, blah. I'm not loving that. She says that the workspace should be accessible because the workings will include the use of candles and blah, 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 blah. It does need to be accessible, but if you have only a specific spot, for example, okay, let's do a working altar example. First of all, what is a working altar? A working altar is a place where you're able to put dedicated items on it, as well as craft on there. So thinks of like statuettes, like I'm working with the element fire. Let's just say I'm working with the element of fire. So I would bring items that would represent the element of fire. A little hindsight, if you are working with one specific element, do not to forget to also invoke the other elements as well, because you cannot just have fire and only fire without the other elements present, because it's just not, it's either going to be way too overpowering and things are going to go awry, or it's just not going to be as good of a connection because all the elements work in conjunction together. So if you are working with the element of fire, never just invoke just fire. You need to invoke all of them, and then you need to, you know, work directly with the fire, or with water, or with air, or with earth, or with spirit, etc., etc., etc. There always needs to be a balance before you can work with one individualized element. Okay, so for example, I am working with the element of fire. Then I have, you know, things specifically dedicated for fire. They're kind of like in the front and center because that is like the main focus. I would have the other elemental quality, the other element items with the qualities of air. I feel like I'm saying that weird. And then other stuff. And on top of that, I want to, you know, consecrate a candle specifically for fire. Like, yes, candle, fire is fire, but I want to consecrate it specifically for fire. So I'm like putting herbs and stuff like that in a candle on a table. So that is becoming an altar with dedicated, you know, symbolism, as well as me working on it. That is a working altar. But what if you cannot do it all on the same surface? And that's fine. In my opinion, I've been, you know, a practitioner for over 18 years. That's okay. If you want to imbue the energy of fire and you have a spot, you know, across the room set aside for it, and then you're like, let's say on the couch trying to, you know, write or do something, or on the floor because you need more space, that's okay. It doesn't all need to be in a perfect spot on a flat surface and that kind of stuff. It needs to work for you. So many ways to make that happen. It doesn't need to be absolutely like perfect. So I don't like some of the terms she uses, that this is what it should do, this is what it needs to look like, this is what it's, you know, ideal for it. I don't like that. It needs to work for you. I like the examples, but I really feel that a lot of these books that become popular about, you know, reading and learning spirituality and witchcraft and spells and rituals and blah, 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 I feel that it installs so much like perfectionism into people who are just learning, that it just makes them feel like it's not good enough. It's just not attainable enough, like they're doing it wrong. And I hate that. Okay. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. And is in the hospital bed, home. My altar is on the other side of the room, but I have a table next to my bed and I use for mini altar, and I use that a lot. Perfect. Exactly. It's whatever works for you, what you need it for. That's great. White and afraid because it's between. Is astral projection real? Yes, yes it is. Okay, moving on to the last page and how she talks about the thing that I just said that I don't really like. So she provides an example of a personal altar with a layout by gender, because here she also specifies the gender, attributes to the items. And she even talked about, like, oh, on the left you should put, was it, I don't remember which one she's, okay, I think on the left she said you need to put down like the masculine. No, on the left she said to put down the feminine energies type of thing for the altar, and on the right should be the masculine type of things for the altar for imbuing the energy. Now, female and masculine energies are a lot different than gender. It is there was a whole big conversation about it towards the beginning of the book, and I like how she specified that it's not exactly a gender thing, it is the energy thing, like yin and yang sort of stuff. I've actually, maybe it's the first time that I paid attention to it in regards to how you're supposed to put a specific, energy in a specific spot. Huh? Maybe if it works for you, then it works for you, I guess. What ends up working for me is kind of like the opposite, because I don't remember when this was, but this was way long ago when I was just like a younger kid. I was like early teenage years. And I think I don't exactly remember what the entire full situation was, but there was a couple walking in front of me, and like nobody that I really knew. And then there was like an older lady also that kind of ended up passing me. She's like one of those like really cute old grannies, the ones that I would consider a really cute granny. And she went up to them, and then she ended up like switching their hands when they were walking. And then she told the guy that the lady was holding hands with, and they were older, they were like young adults, that kind of thing. She goes, unless it's a gentlemanly thing where you're on the side of the street, because a gentlemanly thing, if you're walking and whatever, blah blah blah, the man is usually on the side of where the street is, the road is, to kind of like protect the female. That is like the etiquette, the historical etiquette type of stuff. And she goes, unless you are a gentlemanly thing on the side of the street, the women should always hold your right hand, because women are on the right, because women are always right. And then that was just like a random thing she did while I was walking and they were walking, and she ended up like switching them, and she kind of like moved on and with her life and just kept going. And that just kind of stuck with me forever. It's just like, okay, the woman is always on the right because women are right. And I like that. So for some reason that kind of stuck with me. And it's just, yeah, it's great. That not because of a specific thing, but just because of that little event, that little moment situation happened. So yes, I do like how Universe Within mentioned male and female energy. That is the more proper term for it, I would say. And she talks about how she would place it. So she has her symbol thing, that kind of thing, and it's very structured. It's a formula. I don't love it. Like, yes, if it works for you, it's a good base to start off of, but it's just not something that you need. You can do however works for you. Moving on from my little diversion of a story, she's talking about consecrating the elements and the type of items that you should have in regards to invoking like the elements. And I like that, how she talks about like having the earth, air, water, fire, and what kind of items she suggests you can have to kind of imbue that energy. And I agree with it, because if you are trying to invoke the energies, you need to have something that would kind of like add to it. No, hold on, wrong term. Not add to it. Something that would give them like an anchor point. So even as much as the alchemical symbols of water, fire, earth, air, that kind of stuff, just to kind of have an invitation, a place for them to anchor themselves. And I like this little passage that she says, if you plan to open the elemental gateways and invite elemental beings to the party, put out the snacks they like. And I really, really like that, because it is a way to invite them. So consecration elements also serve as an offering to entice those beings to help you out. So I do like that. Okay, moving on. She talks about consecrating your altar, and she talks about the banishing pentagram, that sort of thing, and how to like in regards, yes and no. Again, I like her explanations and like the kind of things. So it's just not full on exactly what you need to do, that kind of stuff. So she also mentions in regards to like, you know, making sure you are planning specific, like if you're using incense or specific things, make sure you have the proper airflow, make sure you have proper ventilation for that kind of stuff. To also, you know, make sure that you can realize just how fast and the speed of which the candles burn. And it's just, I like it and I don't like it. It really all depends on you. Then she talks about the basic banishing pentagram, or the basic banishing pentacle, and how following altar consecration rituals, you'll see a basic banishing pentagram as a magical means to clear any spiritual or energetic imbalances or impurity from the physical materials than the altar itself. So pretty much a banishing pentagram is just doing a star that's going counterclockwise. So invocation, or bringing energy in or inviting energy, is something that goes clockwise. But banishing and releasing something is something that would go counterclockwise. I don't know if this is going to be mirrored, if it's going to be different, but if you take a look at a clock and you know which way that the minute hand is going, I mean, are physical clocks even a thing, or is everything like digital now? Because there during one of my German language classes, we were learning how to tell time, and it was in regards to looking at like a face of a clock and that kind of stuff. So she is just, the teacher was pointing out the different like timing of it, and like this is the quarter, this is the second quarter, or whatever. And there were so many people in that classroom that did not know how to tell time on a clock, that it needed to be digital. They couldn't tell it on like an actual like clock thing, which is kind of a little bit of like, oh my gosh, no way, are we really in this type of reality that we can't even tell time on a clock? But anyways, I diverge. So if you look at a clock and you see which way the minute hand or the hour hand goes, that is clockwise. Counterclockwise is the opposite direction that a clock would never go. And she talks about banishing a pentagram and how you do it towards the end to kind of like release any of the energies or stuff like that that is kind of like contained, retained, put together, and that sort of stuff. But I also think there's a different way. I don't like the whole thought of banishing at the end of a ritual of the energies. It just makes me feel like you're wasting all the time and effort that you just put into the work. Why would you banish all the energies that you have just, you know, put in so much effort to call forth and to help you? If you are closing the ritual, you do a closing, a grounding, and a kind of like release of excess grounding type of thing. At least that's what I do. because you can't step away from my working still holding on to everything that you just called forth. That's just going to be too much. You're going to be having anxiety for like an entire week afterwards. You need to release what you don't need, but you don't banish. I'm not loving the terminology of that. Yeah, I don't like that. So invoking energies is one thing, banishing energies is another thing, but releasing energies is a third thing. I'm not loving the banishing part. At the end of the ritual, you need to, reopen your circle. You need to let go of the excess, the overflow of the energy. You need to, say goodbye to the elements that you're working with and thank them for being there with you. You don't banish. I don't know. To me, that just sounded weird. So yeah. Then she talks about specific postures. So ritualistic body postures and kind of like their meanings, and she talks about like the next figure, and this is kind of where we're stopping, but I'm just showing that figurine there. And it is very ceremonial magic, very kind of like elaborate, that sort of stuff. And if it works for you for doing this, then it works for you. I don't know if I'm just too lazy, but it doesn't really work for me. Like, yes, I would, sometimes open up circles. I would have my arms open and that kind of stuff, but I have not memorized what specific body positions, hand gestures, or that kind of stuff is. And I don't really need to in my 18 plus years of being a witch, that kind of stuff. So if you want to go all full on, ceremoniously magic and fancy, and it helps, those kind of movements help you get into the role, absolutely, please do it. That is great. I think it is a great way to kind of set yourself in the right mindset for it. But it's also not super necessary because there's other ways of, connecting with that and that sort of thing. And this is where we are ending for today. We'll talk about more about the ritualistic posings later. Okay. So, hi. She's saying analog clock, and I can read it, put a lot of energy, but my dyslexia stops me from. Yeah, analog clocks. At least you know how kind of to read them if you need to, but it's as long as if you know how to do it when you need to, that's the only important part. Some of the wording is very rigid, yes. So, okay, so the name of the book is Elemental Witchcraft by Heron Misha. I have links of it on my website. I don't think I put links of it in this video yet. I will as soon as I kind of like get off from this live and add the link to it. Yes, so that is like the end of what we're talking about during this live. For next week, we're going to be going over pages 177 through 192. So that is starting from this page with the poses. If you don't have the page numbers for the book, if you're reading it on a Kindle or something, until page 192, which is until this page, the end of the pentacle positions and stuff. Invoking and banishing pentagrams until the end of that page. All right, so that is going to be for next week. Let's see. So the info and how much to read my website, yes, I have. So ElenaEnchanted.com, there is a spot called the book Coven, and I have blog posts and kind of like things going over from these readings, from the gatherings that we have on there. I also include graphs and a little bit of other little extra stuffs and that kind of stuff on the website. And yes, on there I have a calendar posting of when our gatherings are, and the info, which pages we're going over, and that kind of stuff. So all of that is all up on my website. Yeah. All right. So that is it for today. I'm really, really glad you guys were able to, stop by, hang out, and chat, and have this little witchy session with me. I will see you on the next week. So don't forget to, like, subscribe, the whole shebang. We have tons of magical fun here. Check out my website because I do offer other blog posts and other things to it, and more news and more info. And with that, I will see you on the other video, next week, whenever you decide to stop by on my little enchanting journey. So I'll see you then. Love you all. Bye.